The cold spring rain of 1872 pelted down on the dusty main street of Hollow Creek, Texas, as Violet Davis pulled her woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders. With only $15 to her name and nowhere else to turn, she stared up at the weathered sign swinging above the mercantile. Cook wanted inquire within. A shiver ran through her that had nothing to do with the rain. This could be her salvation or another disappointment in a life that had dealt her far too many already. Violet took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and pushed open the door. The bell above jangled, announcing her arrival. Inside, the mercantile was warm and smelled of coffee, leather, and tobacco, a welcome respite from the rain. Behind the counter stood a portly man with spectacles perched on his nose. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, looking up from his ledger. "I've come about the cooking position," Violet said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her nerves. The shopkeeper raised his eyebrows. "That'd be for the Yates ranch, madam. Mr. Vaughn Yates is looking for someone to cook for him and his little girl." Violet nodded. "I'm an excellent cook, sir. I've worked in restaurants in San Antonio for years." "I don't doubt your skills, miss, but—" The shopkeeper hesitated. "The Yates place is 5 miles out of town, pretty isolated, and Mr. Yates, well, he's a good man, but since his wife passed on 3 years back, he's been—" He trailed off, searching for the right words. "Reserved. That little girl of his could use a woman's touch, though." "When can I meet Mr. Yates?" Violet asked, undeterred. "As luck would have it, he's due in town today." The shopkeeper glanced toward the window. That might be him now. Violet turned to see a tall figure dismounting from a rain-spattered horse outside. Her heart quickened as the door opened, and a man stepped inside, bringing with him the smell of rain and leather. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair with a touch of silver at the temples. His face was weathered from the sun but handsome in a rugged way, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw covered in stubble. His eyes, a piercing blue, surveyed the store before landing on Violet. "Morning, Tom," he said to the shopkeeper, his voice deep and rich. "Morning, Vaughn. This lady here was just asking about your cooking position." Vaughn Yates's gaze lingered on Violet, assessing her with those piercing eyes. "Is that so?" Violet straightened her back. "Yes, sir. My name is Violet Davis. I'm an experienced cook looking for work." "Why Hollow Creek?" he asked bluntly. "Not exactly a destination for folks with options." Violet swallowed hard. "I believe in being direct, Mr. Yates. My previous employer in San Antonio closed his restaurant unexpectedly. I have references but limited funds. I saw your advertisement and thought my skills might be of use to you." Something in Vaughn's expression softened slightly. "I've got a 6-year-old daughter, Miss Davis. We live 5 miles from town on a working cattle ranch. It's not an easy life." "I don't expect easy, Mr. Yates. I expect honest work for honest pay." For a long moment he studied her, then nodded once. "I need to pick up supplies and collect my daughter from her lesson with Mrs. Wilson. If you're serious, be ready in an hour. We'll give it a week's trial." Relief washed over Violet. "Thank you, Mr. Yates." "I'll be ready." After Vaughn left, the shopkeeper Tom gave her a sympathetic smile. "He's been through a lot, that one. His wife, Hannah, died in childbirth with their second baby, lost them both. His daughter, Emma, is all he has left." Violet's heart clenched. "That's terrible, indeed." "Been through a string of cooks since then. None seem to stick." Tom lowered his voice. "That little girl needs a mother's love, if you ask me. Vaughn does his best, but—" Violet nodded, understanding. "I'll do my job well, Mr. Tom. That's all I can promise." "Sometimes that's enough," Tom replied with a knowing smile. An hour later, Violet stood outside the mercantile with her single carpetbag, watching as Vaughn approached with a small girl holding his hand. The child had her father's blue eyes and dark curls that bounced with each step. She wore a simple blue dress and clutched a small wooden horse in her free hand. "Emma, this is Miss Davis," Vaughn said as they reached Violet. "She's going to be our new cook." Emma studied Violet with solemn eyes. "Can you make apple pie? Our last cook couldn't make apple pie right." Violet smiled and knelt to the girl's level. "I make the best apple pie in all of Texas. That's a promise." Emma's serious expression didn't change, but she nodded as if accepting this statement conditionally, pending evidence. The journey to the Yates ranch was made in their wagon, with Violet sitting beside Emma while Vaughn drove. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and as they left town behind, the landscape opened up into rolling hills covered in spring wildflowers. Violet tried to engage Emma in conversation, but the girl gave only one-word answers, clutching her wooden horse tightly. "Pa carved thunder for me," she finally volunteered, holding up the horse. "He's the fastest horse in Texas." "He looks very fast indeed," Violet agreed. "Does he have any friends?" Emma shook her head. "He's alone, like us." Violet felt her heart break a little at the matter-of-fact way the child stated this. She caught Vaughn's glance back at them, his expression unreadable. The Yates ranch came into view as they crested a hill, a sturdy two-story house with a wide porch, several outbuildings and corrals containing horses and cattle. It was larger than Violet had expected, speaking to a certain prosperity. "It's not much," Vaughn said, seeming to read her thoughts, "but it's home." "It's beautiful," Violet replied honestly. As they pulled up to the house, a weathered man emerged from one of the outbuildings. "That's Henry," Vaughn explained. "Foreman, been with the ranch longer than I have." Henry tipped his hat to Violet as Vaughn helped her down from the wagon. "Madam." "Henry, this is Miss Davis, our new cook," Vaughn said. "Miss Davis, besides Henry, we've got 3 other hands who work the ranch. They take their meals in the bunkhouse, but Henry eats with us in the main house." "I'll need to know how many I'm cooking for and any preferences," Violet said professionally. "We're not fussy eaters, Miss Davis," Henry said with a kind smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Just hungry ones." Vaughn showed Violet to her room, a small but clean chamber off the kitchen with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small window overlooking the vegetable garden. "The previous cook kept it up somewhat," he said, nodding toward the garden. "Feel free to use whatever grows there." "Thank you," Violet said, setting down her bag. "I'll start dinner right away." "We eat at 6, Vaughn replied, then hesitated. "Emma likes routine, her mother." He stopped, his jaw tightening. "Just keep things simple." "I understand," Violet assured him. Left alone, Violet took a deep breath and looked around the kitchen. It was well equipped but showed signs of neglect, a thin layer of dust on the higher shelves, pots not quite in their proper places. Opening the pantry, she found it reasonably well stocked with staples. She rolled up her sleeves and set to work. By 6 o'clock, Violet had prepared a hearty beef stew, fresh biscuits, and green beans from the garden. The kitchen was warm and filled with delicious aromas when Vaughn and Emma entered, followed by Henry. Emma's eyes widened at the sight of the food. "It smells like—" She started, then stopped, her little face clouding. "Like what, sweetheart?" Violet asked gently. "Like before," Emma whispered, and Violet understood she meant when her mother was alive. Vaughn's expression tightened, but he said nothing as they took their seats. The meal began in silence, but as they ate, Henry asked Violet polite questions about her background. She shared that she'd grown up in Louisiana but had moved to Texas after her parents died of fever when she was 18. "Been on my own since then," she explained. "Cooking's always come natural to me. This stew certainly proves that," Henry said appreciatively. "Best meal we've had in this house for some time." Violet noticed Emma stealing glances at her throughout the meal. When dessert warm apple cobbler was served, the girl's eyes lit up. She took a cautious bite, then looked up at Violet with the first genuine smile Violet had seen from her. "It's good," Emma declared. "Real good." "Thank you, Emma," Violet said, warmth spreading through her chest. Later, after Henry had retired to his quarters and Emma was put to bed, Violet cleaned the kitchen, aware of Vaughn watching her from the doorway. "Emma liked your cooking," he said finally. "I'm glad," Violet replied, wiping down the table. "She doesn't warm to people easily, not anymore." He paused. "Your room comfortable enough?" "Yes, thank you." Vaughn nodded, seeming about to say something more, then thought better of it. "Breakfast at 5, the hands start early." "I'll be ready," Violet assured him. After he left, Violet sank into a chair at the clean kitchen table, exhaustion finally catching up with her. This wasn't the life she'd imagined for herself, but it was a roof over her head and honest work. And that little girl's smile. There was something about Emma that tugged at Violet's heart. Violet settled into a rhythm at the Yates ranch over the next few days. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Vaughn, Emma, Henry, and the ranch hands. The men devoured her fluffy biscuits, eggs, and bacon with enthusiasm, and even the reserved Vaughn seemed to enjoy her cooking, though he said little. Emma, however, began to thaw. On Violet's third morning, as she kneaded dough for the day's bread, the little girl appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her nightgown, clutching thunder. "Morning, Emma," Violet said with a smile. "You're up early." "I like watching you cook," Emma said, climbing onto a chair at the table. "Ma used to let me help." Violet's hands stilled in the dough. "Would you like to help me?" Emma nodded eagerly. Violet showed her how to shape small rolls from the dough, and soon the girl's serious face was alight with concentration. "Pa says you're only staying a week," Emma said suddenly. "It's a trial period," Violet explained, "to see if I'm a good fit here." "I hope you stay," Emma said quietly, not looking up from her dough. "The last cook was mean. She yelled when I came in the kitchen." Violet's heart clenched. "I will never yell at you for coming to see me, Emma, I promise." When Vaughn entered the kitchen half an hour later, he stopped short at the sight of his daughter, flour up to her elbows, helping Violet arrange rolls on a baking sheet. "Emma," he said, his voice carrying a note of surprise, "you're up early." "I'm helping Miss Davis," Emma announced proudly. "She says I'm a natural baker." Vaughn's eyes met Violet's over his daughter's head. Something passed between them, gratitude from him, understanding from her. "Is that so?" he said, his voice gentler than Violet had yet heard it. "Well, I look forward to tasting your creations." That evening, as Violet served the fresh rolls with dinner, Emma announced, "I helped make these, Pa, did you now?" Vaughn said, breaking open a roll and releasing its steam. "They look perfect. Miss Davis is teaching me to cook like Ma did," Emma said with innocent frankness. A shadow crossed Vaughn's face, and for a moment, Violet feared she'd overstepped. But then he nodded slowly. "Your mother would be proud of you, learning such important skills." After Emma was in bed, Vaughn found Violet on the back porch, enjoying the cool evening air after a day in the hot kitchen. He settled into the chair beside her, offering a small glass of amber liquid. "Whiskey," he explained. "Not exactly ladylike, but after a long day." Violet accepted the glass with a small smile. "My father used to say a small whiskey at day's end was good medicine." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching as the last light faded from the western sky and stars began to appear. "I haven't seen Emma take to someone like that since." Vaughn trailed off. "She's a wonderful child," Violet said sincerely. "Smart and kind. She's been through a lot, we both have." Vaughn took a sip of his whiskey. "Hannah, my wife, she loved this time of evening. Used to say it was when the day settled its accounts with the night." "That's beautiful," Violet murmured. "She was a beautiful person." His voice was rough with emotion. "Been 3 years, but sometimes it feels like yesterday. Grief doesn't follow a schedule," Violet said softly. "My parents have been gone 5 years now. Some days I still turn to tell my mother something before remembering she's not there." Vaughn studied her in the gathering darkness. "You understand, then?" "I do." Another silence fell between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Finally, Vaughn cleared his throat. "Your week's trial ends tomorrow." Violet's heart sank. Had she misread the situation? "Yes, it does. I'd like you to stay on, permanently if you're willing. Emma needs," he stopped himself. "The ranch needs a good cook, and you're the best we've had." Relief flooded through Violet. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Yates." "Vaughn," he said. "If you're staying, you might as well call me Vaughn." "Violet," she offered in return. He nodded, the ghost of a smile touching his lips as he stood. "Good night, Violet. Good night, Vaughn." As spring turned to summer, Violet became indispensable to the Yates household. Beyond her cooking duties, she began to help Emma with her lessons, taught her simple sewing, and tended the vegetable garden until it flourished. The kitchen, once merely functional, became the warm heart of the home. Vaughn, too, seemed to soften in her presence. He started lingering over coffee in the mornings, telling her about the day's work ahead. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch together, talking about everything and nothing: the ranch, Emma's progress, books they'd read, memories of their lives before. One sweltering July afternoon, Violet was teaching Emma to make lemonade when they heard a commotion outside. Rushing to the window, they saw Vaughn and the hands returning early, surrounding a wagon moving at a careful pace. "Someone's hurt," Violet said, setting aside the lemons. "Emma, fetch clean towels and fill the wash basin with fresh water." The girl nodded solemnly and hurried to do as asked while Violet went outside. As the wagon drew closer, she saw Henry at the reins and Vaughn in the back, supporting a young ranch hand Timothy, barely 18 and new to the ranch. "What happened?" Violet called as they pulled up. "Bull got him," Vaughn said grimly. "Gored his leg pretty bad." Violet helped them carry Timothy into the house and onto the kitchen table, which she quickly covered with a clean sheet. The young man's face was pale with pain and blood loss, his right thigh torn open in a vicious wound. "Emma, go to your room," Vaughn ordered when his daughter appeared with the towels. "But Pa, now, Emma." The girl reluctantly obeyed, casting a worried glance at Timothy before she left. "Doc Wilson's out at the Mackenzie place," Henry said. "Sent one of the boys for him, but it'll be a couple hours at least. We need to clean the wound and stop the bleeding," Violet said, already rolling up her sleeves. "Vaughn, I need your whiskey, the good stuff, and I'll need thread and a clean needle." For the next hour, Violet worked steadily, cleaning the wound with whiskey while Timothy bit down on a leather strap, stitching the torn flesh with neat, small stitches she'd learned from her mother, who had assisted a doctor in Louisiana. Vaughn stayed by her side, handing her what she needed, his steady presence a comfort in the crisis. When Dr. Wilson finally arrived, he examined Violet's work with raised eyebrows. "Fine stitching, Miss Davis. You've likely saved this young man's leg, if not his life." "My mother was a doctor's assistant," Violet explained, washing blood from her hands. "She taught me a few things." "More than a few," the doctor said admiringly. "You've got a natural gift." Later, after Timothy had been moved to the bunkhouse to recover and the kitchen cleaned of blood, Violet found herself trembling with delayed reaction. Vaughn appeared at her side with a glass of whiskey. "Drink this," he said gently. She accepted it gratefully, letting the liquor burn away the last of her nerves. "Will he be all right?" "Thanks to you, yes," Vaughn said, his voice warm with something more than gratitude. That was impressive. Violet, most women would have fainted at the sight. "I'm not most women," she replied with a small smile. "No," he agreed, his blue eyes intent on her face. "You certainly are not." That night, after checking on Emma, Violet found Vaughn waiting on the porch with 2 glasses of whiskey. The air was heavy with summer heat, fireflies blinking in the darkness beyond the porch. "I keep thinking about today," Vaughn said as she sat beside him. "How lucky we were that you were here." "I'm glad I could help," Violet said sincerely. "It's more than that." Vaughn turned to face her, his expression serious in the lantern light. "Before you came, this place was just existing. Emma and I, we were getting by, but not living, not really." Violet's heart quickened at his words. "And now there's laughter in the kitchen again. Emma smiles, really smiles, and he paused, searching for words. "I find myself looking forward to these evenings with you." Violet felt warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the whiskey. "I look forward to them too." Vaughn reached out hesitantly and touched her hand. His fingers were calloused from ranch work, but his touch was gentle. "I never expected to feel this way again," he admitted quietly. "After Hannah died, I thought that part of me died too." "Vaughn," Violet whispered, turning her hand to intertwine her fingers with his. Before he could respond, a small voice called from inside the house. "Pa, Miss Davis." They broke apart as Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes sleepily. "I had a bad dream." "Come here, sweetheart," Vaughn said, lifting his daughter onto his lap. "Everything's all right." "I dreamed Timothy died," Emma said, her voice small. "Timothy's going to be just fine," Violet assured her, smoothing back the girl's dark curls. "Miss Davis fixed him up, and Dr. Wilson says he'll heal good as new." Emma looked up at Violet with trusting eyes. "Promise." "Promise," Violet said, her heart full to bursting with affection for this child. "Can I stay out here with you and Pa for a little while?" Emma asked. "Of course you can," Vaughn said, glancing at Violet with a soft smile that made her pulse quicken. The 3 of them sat together on the porch, talking quietly about the stars and the night sounds, until Emma fell asleep against her father's chest. As Vaughn carried his daughter back to bed, Violet realized with startling clarity that she was falling in love not just with Vaughn, but with Emma and this life they were slowly building together. The next morning, Violet woke early to find a wild rosebush flowering outside her window, its delicate pink blooms nodding in the morning breeze. She picked one perfect blossom and tucked it into her hair before starting breakfast. When Vaughn entered the kitchen, his eyes immediately went to the flower. A slow smile spread across his face. "It suits you," he said simply. The next few weeks brought a subtle but significant change in their relationship. Vaughn began finding reasons to be near the house during the day, checking the roof, mending the porch steps, things that had gone unattended for months. They worked together in the garden in the evenings, talking easily while Emma played nearby with Thunder and the other toy horses Vaughn had carved for her. One afternoon in late August, a thunderstorm rolled in from the west, bringing welcome relief from the heat but forcing everyone indoors. Emma sat at the kitchen table drawing pictures while Violet prepared dinner and Vaughn worked on ranch accounts. "Miss Davis?" Emma asked suddenly. "Yes, dear," Violet replied, rolling out dough for a pie. "Can I call you Violet? Pa does." Violet exchanged a quick glance with Vaughn, who looked up from his ledger with interest. "Of course you can if your father doesn't mind." "It's fine by me," Vaughn said. Emma beamed and returned to her drawing. Later, as Violet set the finished pie on the windowsill to cool, the little girl tugged at her skirt. "I made this for you," Emma said. Presenting her drawing, Violet took it carefully. The childish illustration showed three figures standing in front of a house: a tall man with dark hair, a smaller figure with a dress, and between them, holding both their hands, a little girl. "That's Pa and that's me," Emma explained, pointing. "And that's you, we're a family." Violet felt tears spring to her eyes. "It's beautiful, Emma, thank you." She looked up to find Vaughn watching them, his expression unreadable. When their eyes met, he didn't look away. That evening, after Emma was asleep, the storm still raged outside. Violet jumped at a particularly loud crash of thunder, nearly dropping the plate she was drying. "Still afraid of storms?" Vaughn asked from the doorway, startling her again. "How did you know I was afraid of storms?" Violet asked, setting down the plate. "You tense up when thunder rolls in, start finding indoor tasks," he said with a small smile. "I notice things about you, Violet." She felt herself blushing under his steady gaze. "It's silly, I know, not silly at all." He moved closer, taking the dish towel from her hands and setting it aside. "We're all afraid of something. What are you afraid of, Vaughn Yates?" she asked softly. His eyes held hers, serious now. "Losing someone I care about, again." The implications of his words hung between them. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the kitchen in stark white light, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. Violet flinched instinctively. "It's all right," Vaughn murmured, and then his arms were around her, strong and steady. "I've got you." Violet leaned into his embrace, her heart racing. She could feel his heartbeat too, strong against her cheek. When she looked up at him, the question in his eyes was unmistakable. She answered by rising on her tiptoes, bringing her face closer to his. Their first kiss was gentle, hesitant, the kiss of two people who had known loss and were afraid to hope again. But as Vaughn's arms tightened around her, the kiss deepened, becoming something more urgent, more certain. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," Vaughn admitted, his voice rough. "What took you so long?" Violet asked with a smile. He touched her face, tracing the curve of her cheek with calloused fingers. "Fear, mostly, and guilt, feeling this way about someone who isn't Hannah." "I understand," Violet said softly. "I would never try to replace her, Vaughn, not for you and not for Emma." "I know that," he said. "And I think Hannah would want me to be happy, to find someone who brings light back into our lives the way you have." They stayed in the kitchen, talking late into the night, sharing stories of their pasts and tentative hopes for the future. The storm passed, leaving behind a washed, clean world and the promise of something new between them. The next morning, Henry's knowing smile, when he saw them together at breakfast, told Violet that their changed relationship hadn't gone unnoticed. But it was Emma's reaction that mattered most, and the little girl seemed delighted to find Violet and her father sitting close together. shoulders touching as they drank their coffee. As summer faded into fall, the ranch grew busy with preparations for winter. Violet preserved vegetables from the garden, put up jams and jellies, and filled the root cellar with provisions. Vaughn and the hands worked from dawn to dusk, mending fences, repairing outbuildings, and preparing the herd for the coming cold. Despite their busy days, Vaughn made time each evening for Violet. Sometimes they simply sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. Other times, after Emma was asleep, they would talk for hours by the fire, learning each other's stories, discovering shared dreams. "I never thought I'd find this again," Vaughn confessed one evening, holding her close as they sat on the sofa. "After Hannah died, I was sure that part of my life was over." "Life has a way of surprising us," Violet replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "That it does." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Emma adores you, you know. I adore her too," Violet said honestly. "She's a remarkable child. She's been asking questions," Vaughn said carefully, "about us." Violet sat up straighter. "What kind of questions?" "She wants to know if you're going to stay forever, if you might become her new mother someday." His blue eyes were serious as they searched her face. "I told her that was something you and I would need to discuss." Violet's heart pounded. "And is it something you want to discuss?" Vaughn took her hands in his. "Violet, these past months with you have been the happiest I've known since losing Hannah. You've brought life back to this house to me. I can't imagine going back to how things were before you came." "I feel the same way," Violet admitted. "I never expected to find a home here, but that's what this place has become, what you and Emma have become." "Then perhaps," Vaughn said carefully, "we should consider making it official, not right away," he added quickly. "I know it's still early, but someday soon." Violet felt tears prick her eyes. "I would like that very much, Vaughn." He pulled her close again, sealing the moment with a tender kiss that held the promise of a future together. The next day brought a rare trip to town for supplies. Violet needed fabric for new curtains and winter clothes for Emma, who was growing faster than seemed possible. As they loaded their purchases into the wagon, Emma spotted a young woman walking down the street. "Look, Pa, it's Miss Helen from the schoolhouse." Emma waved enthusiastically. The woman, who looked to be in her early 20s with honey blonde hair and a pretty face, smiled and approached them. "Emma Yates, how wonderful to see you. Are you excited about starting school next month?" "Yes, madam," Emma said enthusiastically. "I've been practicing my letters with Miss Davis." She pointed proudly to Violet. "She's Pa's special friend." Helen smiled warmly at Violet. "Helen Donovan," she introduced herself. "I'll be Emma's teacher this year." "Violet Davis," Violet replied, returning the smile. "It's lovely to meet you." "Miss Donovan is new to Hollow Creek," Vaughn explained. "Came from back east to teach at our little schoolhouse." "Boston," Helen confirmed. "It's quite a change, but I'm enjoying the adventure." They chatted for a few minutes about the upcoming school term, then said their goodbyes. As they drove home, Emma chattered excitedly about school and her new teacher. "Miss Helen is so pretty and smart," she declared, "but not as pretty as you, Miss Violet." Violet laughed, touched by the child's loyalty. "That's very sweet of you to say, Emma. It's true though, isn't it, Pa?" Emma insisted. Vaughn's eyes met Violet's over his daughter's head. "Absolutely true," he agreed, his gaze warm with affection. The first frost came early that year, painting the landscape with silver overnight. Violet rose before dawn to find the world transformed, every blade of grass, every fence post outlined in delicate white. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped onto the porch to admire the beauty. "It's like a fairy land," came Emma's voice as the child slipped out to join her, still in her nightgown. "Indeed it is," Violet agreed, putting an arm around the girl's shoulders. "But you'll catch your death out here without a coat." "Let's go in and make a special breakfast to celebrate the first frost." In the kitchen, they worked together to prepare cinnamon-scented apple pancakes. Emma was becoming quite skilled at cooking, taking pride in measuring ingredients precisely and flipping pancakes with careful concentration. Vaughn found them there, laughing together over a slightly misshapen pancake. He stood in the doorway watching them, his expression soft with love. "Something smells wonderful," he said, coming into the kitchen and dropping a kiss on top of Emma's head. We're making first frost pancakes, Emma explained importantly. It's a tradition. Is it now? Vaughn asked, raising an eyebrow at Violet. It is as of today, Violet replied with a smile. Every tradition has to start somewhere. I like that, Vaughn said, his hand finding hers briefly. Building our own traditions. The phrase our own wasn't lost on Violet, and warmth bloomed in her chest at the implication. Later that day, as Violet was hanging freshly washed curtains in the parlor, she heard a wagon approaching. Looking out the window, she was surprised to see Dr. Wilson driving up to the house. Dr. Wilson, she greeted him at the door. Is everything all right? Afternoon, Miss Davis, the doctor said, removing his hat. I was out this way checking on the Miller baby and thought I'd stop by to see how young Timothy is faring. He's doing very well, Violet assured him. Back to full duties for nearly a month now. Good, good, the doctor nodded. And may I say your stitching was some of the finest I've seen. You have quite a gift. Thank you, Violet said, slightly embarrassed by the praise. I was just doing what needed to be done. Sometimes that's all medicine is, the doctor said thoughtfully, doing what needs to be done when it needs doing. He hesitated. Miss Davis, I wonder if you might consider assisting me occasionally. There's more sickness and injury in these parts than one doctor can handle alone, and someone with your steady hands and quick thinking would be invaluable. Violet was taken aback by the offer. I don't know what to say, doctor. Say you'll think about it, he suggested. Talk it over with Yates. You wouldn't need to leave the ranch, just ride out with me when there's a need. I could teach you more than your mother had the chance to. After the doctor left, Violet sat at the kitchen table, turning the offer over in her mind. It was unexpected but intriguing. She'd always found satisfaction in helping others, and the memory of how she'd felt after successfully treating Timothy's wound, the mixture of relief, pride, and purpose was powerful. That evening, she told Vaughn about the doctor's visit. What do you think? She asked after explaining the offer. Vaughn considered her question seriously. I think you'd be excellent at it. You have a natural way with people and you're calm in a crisis. But what about my duties here? The cooking, the house, we'd manage, Vaughn assured her. Maybe not as well as with you here full-time, but we'd manage. Emma's learning to cook and I'm not completely helpless in a kitchen. He took her hand. Violet, if this is something you want to do, I support you completely. His support meant everything to her. I think I would like to try, she admitted. Not if it causes hardship here, but if we can make it work. We can make it work, Vaughn said firmly. This is important, Violet. Using your gifts to help others, that's not something to set aside lightly. Impulsively, she leaned forward and kissed him. Thank you for understanding. His arms went around her, drawing her closer. Always, he murmured against her lips. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving were busy ones. In addition to her usual duties, Violet began riding out with Dr. Wilson once or twice a week, assisting with everything from setting broken bones to delivering babies. The work was challenging but deeply satisfying, and she returned to the ranch each time with new knowledge and a sense of purpose. At home, preparations for Emma's first day of school occupied much of their attention. Violet sewed the child a new dress for the occasion, and Vaughn carved her a special pencil box with her name etched into the lid. The morning Emma was to start school dawned clear and cold. The little girl was a bundle of excitement and nerves as Violet helped her dress in her new clothes and braided her dark hair. What if the other children don't like me? Emma asked anxiously as they waited for Vaughn to bring the wagon around. They will love you, Violet assured her, straightening the girl's collar. You're smart and kind and interesting. Just be yourself and you'll make friends in no time. Will you come to school with us? Emma asked, taking Violet's hand. Of course I will, Violet said. I wouldn't miss your first day for anything. The little schoolhouse at the edge of town was already bustling with children and parents when they arrived. Helen Donovan stood at the door, greeting each family warmly. When she saw Emma, her face lit up. Emma Yates. I'm so glad you're here, she said with genuine enthusiasm. We're going to have a wonderful year together. Emma, suddenly shy, pressed against Violet's skirts. Violet gave her an encouraging smile. Go on, Emma. Show Miss Helen how well you've learned your letters. With a deep breath, Emma straightened her shoulders and stepped forward. Good morning, Miss Helen. I'm ready to learn. Helen's smile widened. That's exactly what I like to hear. She looked up at Vaughn and Violet. She'll be fine, I promise. You can collect her at 3 o'clock. As they turned to leave, Emma suddenly ran back and threw her arms around Violet's waist. Bye, Miss Violet. I'll tell you all about school later. Violet's heart swelled with love for the child. I can't wait to hear everything. On the drive back to the ranch, Vaughn reached over and took Violet's hand. You're good with her, he said simply. Better than good. She makes it easy, Violet replied. She's a remarkable child. She is, Vaughn agreed, and she deserves a mother who loves her. He glanced at Violet meaningfully. Someone who will be there for her, guide her as she grows up. Violet's pulse quickened. Vaughn, I'm not proposing, not yet, he clarified with a small smile, but I want you to know that's where my thoughts are heading. I love you, Violet Davis. I didn't expect to love anyone again after Hannah, but here we are, tears pricked at Violet's eyes. I love you too, Vaughn and Emma, more than I can say. He squeezed her hand. Then we're on the same trail, headed to the same destination. The rest is just a matter of timing. Thanksgiving arrived with a dusting of early snow and the promise of a harsh winter ahead. The Yates home, however, was warm with more than just the heat from the cook stove. Violet had invited Dr. Wilson, and Vaughn had extended the invitation to include all the ranch hands, not just Henry. Even Miss Helen was joining them, having no family nearby with whom to celebrate. The house filled with delicious aromas as Violet and Emma prepared the feast: roast turkey, cornbread stuffing, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, and 3 different kinds of pie. Emma proudly showed off her growing cooking skills to Miss Helen, who praised the child's careful attention to detail. She's going to be quite the accomplished young lady, Helen remarked to Violet as they worked side by side in the kitchen. You've been a wonderful influence on her. Thank you, Violet said sincerely. That means a great deal to me. Helen lowered her voice. The transformation in both Emma and Mr. Yates since you arrived is remarkable. Everyone in town has noticed how much happier they both are. Violet felt her cheeks warm. They've brought just as much happiness to my life. The Thanksgiving meal was joyous and lively, with conversation and laughter flowing as freely as the cider Vaughn had pressed from the last of the fall apples. At the end of the meal, Vaughn stood and tapped his glass for attention. I'd like to propose a toast, he said, his gaze finding Violet at the other end of the table. To new beginnings and the blessings that come when we least expect them. To new beginnings, everyone echoed, raising their glasses. After the guests had gone and Emma was tucked into bed, Violet and Vaughn sat before the fire in the parlor, enjoying a rare moment of quiet together. That was the finest Thanksgiving I can remember, Vaughn said, his arm around Violet's shoulders. It was wonderful, she agreed, leaning against him. Having a full house, everyone together. I was thinking, Vaughn said after a comfortable silence, that perhaps we should plan something special for Christmas, for Emma. What did you have in mind? Violet asked. Vaughn hesitated. Well, that depends on you, actually. He shifted to face her more directly. Violet, I've been carrying something around for weeks now, waiting for the right moment. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. I think this is that moment. Violet's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. This was my grandmother's, Vaughn explained, his voice slightly unsteady. Hannah's ring was buried with her, but Ma left this one to me for. Well, for just this purpose, I think. Vaughn, Violet whispered, her eyes filling with tears. Violet Davis, I love you with all my heart, he said, taking her hand. You came into our lives when we needed you most, and you've become essential to our happiness, to my happiness. Will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? Of becoming a mother to Emma and building a life together here on this ranch? Yes, Violet said without hesitation, joy bubbling up inside her. Yes, with all my heart. Vaughn slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms for a kiss that sealed their promise to each other. When they finally broke apart, Violet asked, When should we tell Emma? A slow smile spread across Vaughn's face. I was thinking tomorrow morning. Give her something special to be thankful for. The next morning, they found Emma already in the kitchen, attempting to make coffee the way she'd seen Violet do it countless times. Good morning, sweetheart, Vaughn said, lifting his daughter for a hug. Violet and I have something important to tell you. Emma looked between them expectantly. What is it? Vaughn set her down and took Violet's hand. Violet has agreed to marry me. She's going to be my wife, and if it's all right with you, your mother. Emma's eyes grew wide, then her face split into the most radiant smile Violet had ever seen. With a cry of delight, the little girl flung herself at Violet, wrapping her arms around her waist and burying her face in her skirts. Does this mean you'll stay forever? Emma asked, looking up with shining eyes. Yes, sweetheart, Violet assured her, kneeling to embrace the child properly. I'll stay forever, and I can call you Ma. Emma's voice was tremulous with hope. Violet felt tears spring to her eyes. If that's what you'd like, I would be honored. Emma hugged her tightly again, then turned to include her father in the embrace. The three of them stood together in the early morning light, a family at last. Word of their engagement spread quickly through Hollow Creek. Tom at the mercantile was particularly pleased, reminding them that he'd been the one to introduce them in the first place. Knew you two would suit each other, he said with satisfaction when they came to town to order supplies for the wedding. Could see it that very first day. They planned a Christmas Eve wedding, simple but meaningful, with Dr. Wilson to give the bride away and Emma as flower girl. Helen Donovan helped Violet sew a wedding dress of cream-colored silk ordered specially from San Antonio. The weeks leading up to Christmas were filled with preparations, both for the wedding and for Emma's first real Christmas celebration since her mother died. Vaughn and Violet agreed that they wanted to make it especially memorable for the child. Snow fell heavily the week before Christmas, turning the ranch into a winter wonderland. Emma delighted in building snowmen and making snow angels, her cheeks rosy with cold and excitement. On December 23rd, Violet was helping Emma wrap a secret gift for her father when they heard riders approaching. Looking out the window, Violet was surprised to see several wagons coming up the road to the ranch. Who could that be in this weather? She wondered aloud. The mystery was solved when the wagons drew closer and Violet recognized nearly half the town among the visitors: Tom from the mercantile and his wife, Dr. Wilson, Miss Helen, the pastor and his family, and many others. Vaughn came in from the barn, looking equally puzzled. What's all this? Surprise, called Tom as he climbed down from the lead wagon. We've come to help get everything ready for tomorrow. The women had brought food and decorations, while the men carried lumber and tools. Can't have a proper wedding without a proper setting, Tom explained. We're going to transform your barn into a Christmas cathedral. Violet was overwhelmed by the kindness of these people, many of whom she'd only known for a few months. As the women took over her kitchen and the men headed to the barn with Vaughn, she found herself momentarily at a loss. Helen noticed her expression and came to her side. This is what community means out here, she explained gently. We take care of our own, and you and Vaughn, you're part of the heart of Hollow Creek now. That night, after their unexpected guests had returned to town, promising to be back early the next day, Violet, Vaughn, and Emma walked out to the barn to see what had been accomplished. Violet gasped when Vaughn opened the doors. The interior had been transformed. Fresh hay covered the floor, and evergreen boughs hung from the rafters, filling the space with their clean, piney scent. Lanterns were strategically placed to cast a warm glow, and at the far end, a simple altar had been constructed, draped with white cloth and flanked by more evergreens. It's beautiful, Violet breathed. Magic, Emma agreed, her eyes wide with wonder. Vaughn put his arms around both of them. Not half as beautiful as the two of you. The next day dawned clear and cold, the fresh snow sparkling in the morning sun. By noon, the ranch was once again filled with visitors, this time dressed in their Sunday best despite the cold and snow. In the main house, Helen and several other women helped Violet dress for her wedding. The cream silk gown was simple but elegant, with a high collar and delicate lace at the wrists. Her hair was arranged in a soft updo with sprigs of holly tucked in for a festive touch. You look beautiful, Helen said sincerely as she adjusted Violet's collar. Like a Christmas angel, Emma added from where she sat on the bed in her new red velvet dress, watching the proceedings with wide eyes. A knock at the door revealed Dr. Wilson, come to escort the bride. "My word," he said when he saw Violet. "Yates is a lucky man indeed." As the winter sun began its early descent, casting long blue shadows across the snow, the wedding guests gathered in the transformed barn. Lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the scene. Vaughn stood at the altar, tall and handsome in his best suit, his face solemn with emotion. The small group of musicians, a fiddler, a guitarist, and Miss Helen's brother on harmonica began to play a sweet, simple melody. Emma entered first, scattering pine needles and holly berries along the makeshift aisle, her face alight with joy. Then came Violet on Dr. Wilson's arm. As she walked toward Vaughn, seeing his face transform with love at the sight of her, she knew with absolute certainty that this was where she belonged. All the twists and turns of her life, the hardships and losses, had led her to this moment, to this man and this child who had become her world. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. They exchanged vows written in their own words, promises to love and cherish each other through whatever life might bring. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Vaughn kissed her with such tenderness that tears sprang to her eyes. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Yates, Vaughn beckoned to Emma. The little girl ran to them and Vaughn lifted her into his arms. "We're a real family now," Emma announced happily, looking from her father to Violet. "Aren't we, Ma?" The words, so simple, so profound, filled Violet's heart to overflowing. "Yes, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We're a family now and forever." The celebration continued well into the evening, with feasting and dancing and laughter filling the barn. As midnight approached, bringing Christmas Day with it, Vaughn found Violet standing just outside the barn door, looking up at the star-filled sky. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, leaning back against him. "Thank you for giving me this life, this family. Thank you for saving us," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple, "for bringing light back into our world." They stood together in the quiet darkness, the sounds of celebration behind them, the promise of their future stretching out before them like the endless Texas sky. 6 months later, on a warm June evening, Violet sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching Emma play with the new puppy Vaughn had surprised her with for her 7th birthday. The girl's delighted laughter filled the air as the small black and white dog chased her across the yard. Vaughn emerged from the house and settled into the chair beside Violet, handing her a glass of lemonade. "How are you feeling today?" he asked, his eyes warm with concern. "Much better," Violet assured him, her hand instinctively going to her still flat stomach. "The morning sickness seems to be easing." The news of her pregnancy, confirmed by Dr. Wilson just 2 weeks earlier, had filled their home with a new kind of joy. Emma was ecstatic at the prospect of becoming a big sister, and Vaughn had wept with happiness when Violet told him. "February seems so far away," he said now, reaching over to cover her hand with his. "It will be here before we know it," Violet replied, "and in the meantime we have plenty to keep us busy." Indeed, life at the Yates Ranch had never been fuller. Violet continued to assist Dr. Wilson several days a month, her skills growing with each case. The knowledge that she would soon have to take a break from this work to focus on her own child filled her with a bittersweet mixture of anticipation and reluctance. Emma was thriving at school, showing a particular aptitude for reading and mathematics. Miss Helen had told them proudly that she was the brightest student in her class. At home, she was an eager helper with the new baby preparations, already planning all the things she would teach her little brother or sister. Vaughn, too, had found new purpose. The ranch was prospering under his careful management, and he had recently been asked to serve on the town council, a position of respect that reflected how much he had changed from the grief-stricken, isolated man Violet had first met. As the sun began to set, painting the western sky in shades of gold and pink, Emma ran up to the porch with the puppy at her heels. "Can we have supper outside tonight?" she asked breathlessly. "Like a picnic." "I think that's a fine idea," Vaughn said, tousling his daughter's hair. "What do you think, Violet?" "A picnic sounds perfect," Violet agreed. "Emma, would you like to help me prepare the food?" As they worked together in the kitchen, Violet marveled at how seamlessly Emma had accepted her as a mother. There were still moments when the child spoke of "my first ma," usually with a wistfulness that tugged at Violet's heart. But there was room in Emma's heart for both mothers, the one she had lost and the one she had found. Later, as they sat on a blanket under the spreading oak tree, enjoying cold chicken and biscuits with fresh strawberries, Violet looked at her husband and stepdaughter, her family, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. "What are you thinking about, Ma?" Emma asked, noticing Violet's contemplative expression. "I was thinking about how lucky I am," Violet replied honestly. "How lucky we all are to have found each other." "It wasn't luck," Vaughn said quietly, his blue eyes steady on hers. "It was providence." Emma looked between them, considering this. "Is that like destiny? Miss Helen was teaching us about that word." "Something like that," Vaughn agreed. "The idea that some things are meant to be even if we don't understand why at the time. Like how Ma came to cook for us when we needed her." Emma asked. "Exactly like that," Violet said, reaching out to smooth the child's dark curls. "I came looking for a job, but I found a home, I found love, and we found you," Emma said simply. "That's the best thing that ever happened to us, isn't it, Pa?" "The very best," Vaughn agreed, taking Violet's hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. As twilight deepened around them and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Violet thought back to that rainy spring day when she had stood outside the mercantile with only $15 to her name and nowhere to go. How different her life had become in just over a year, how full of love and purpose and belonging. She thought of the baby growing beneath her heart, a new life that would join their family in the winter. She thought of Emma, who had hugged her skirt that first week and asked if she could be her mama now. She thought of Vaughn, who had opened his wounded heart to love again. The road ahead would not always be easy. Life in the West was hard, unpredictable. There would be challenges and sorrows along with the joys, but they would face whatever came together as a family. As if reading her thoughts, Vaughn squeezed her hand. "What do you say we go inside and I'll play the guitar for a while? Emma's been asking to learn that new song." "Can I, Ma?" Emma asked eagerly. "I've been practicing." "Of course," Violet said, rising to her feet with Vaughn's help. "I'd love to hear you sing." Later, as the night deepened and Emma slept soundly in her bed, Violet stood at the window of the bedroom she shared with Vaughn, looking out at the moonlit landscape of the ranch, their home. Vaughn came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his hands coming to rest protectively over where their child grew. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Yates," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "I was just thinking about journeys," Violet replied, leaning back against his solid strength. "How sometimes the most important ones lead us to places we never expected to go. Like a cook finding her way to a lonely ranch in the middle of nowhere," Vaughn suggested with a smile in his voice. "Like a wounded man and his daughter finding healing in the most unexpected place," Violet countered, turning in his arms to face him. Vaughn's eyes, silver in the moonlight, held hers with an intensity that still made her heart race. "I love you, Violet Yates, more than I have words to say." "You don't need words," she whispered, rising on her toes to meet his lips with hers. "Just hold me." And he did, there in the quiet darkness of their room, with the promise of tomorrow and all the tomorrows after stretching before them like the endless Texas sky, vast and wild and beautiful, a landscape of possibility, a horizon without end. Outside, the night wind whispered through the grass and stirred the leaves of the oak tree. Inside, in the warmth of each other's arms, Violet and Vaughn found the peace that comes with knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be, with exactly the people you are meant to love. Their journey had not been an easy one, marked as it was by loss and grief. But it had led them here, to this moment, to this love, a love born in the wild heart of Texas, nurtured through hardship and joy, and destined to grow stronger with each passing season. In the room down the hall, Emma slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that her family was complete. And in the quiet sanctuary of their bedroom, Violet and Vaughn held each other close, their hearts beating as one, their future unfurling before them like a road leading home.